Eugene Carroll, who says a big smoke cloud could rob America of many technological advantages.
It would have a very serious effect on our best weapons. These laser-guided bombs that we've seen going right through the doors of our targets, you can't attack with laser-guided munitions. You can't use optically guided munitions. They're simply shut off from the targets.
But the oil fire's black cloud could have wide ecological significance.
This soot, after, let's say, a couple of weeks of burning time, will produce a cloud maybe as half the area of the United States, which is something like 5 million square kilometers. This will deny any penetration of the sun's radiation on the surface of the Earth.
Toucan's worst-case analysis predicts this could drop temperatures by as much as 36 degrees Fahrenheit. And as the black cloud drifts across India and Southeast Asia, it could disrupt weather patterns and agriculture. Ed Bottolato is skeptical that this worst case could come true.
Some people have talked about nuclear winter and things of that nature. From the wells alone, probably not.
But meteorologists who have studied the oil fire scenario say it could even increase cloudiness over the United States and decrease our summertime temperatures. And Bottolato says the long-term global effects could be all too real.
The impact of this would certainly rival the burning for days or weeks in the Amazon. So yes, I think we have to agree that it would have a greenhouse effect.
And there's a second ecological nightmare for the Gulf. Intelligence sources say Saddam Hussein has pre-positioned oil-filled supertankers in the northern end of the Gulf. He also controls several oil pipelines whose jetties extend into the Gulf, and, says the former chief of security for the U.S. Energy Department, they
have the potential, according to intelligence estimates, to put 25 million barrels of oil into the Gulf. This is really significant. It would be the world's Chernobyl of oil spills.
The huge oil slick would be carried by the counterclockwise currents of the Gulf southward along its western shore, toward southern Kuwait and beaches once targeted for amphibious assault by American Marines.
The tactical significance is minor pain caused by fouling the amphibious vehicles and things of that nature, but it is not a hindrance and can't stop the landing.
But farther south, the oil slick could cause a major problem for the desalinization plants crucial to providing drinking water to Saudi Arabia and the Gulf Emirates.
Oh, it will certainly ruin them completely with this amount of oil that will be spilled.
And the oil spill would ruin more than the works of man.
When you put 25 million barrels of oil into an area like the Persian Gulf that has, for all intents and purposes, a fairly fragile ecosystem with reefs, wildlife, migrating waterfowl, things of this nature, you're talking about serious long-term eco damage.
Dr. Richard Turco can't wait to see tomorrow's weather satellite photographs of the oil fire area. He says the real danger here is that a major black cloud could rob much of the world of its 1991 spring and summer growing season, and that could mean hunger or worse for hundreds of millions of people. I'm Dave Marish for Nightline in Washington.
When we come back, we'll discuss the possible environmental damage that could be caused by this war with one of America's leading scientists, Carl Sagan, and with a professor who thinks the burning oil fields would only be a nuisance at worst.
After test driving a Sterling, you find another car with all of its standard features and appointments for $28,500 or less, we'll do more than congratulate you. We'll buy it for you.
To get rid of her gray, my wife can spend 40 minutes. But I discovered this 5-minute hair coloring.
The revolutionary discovery called Just for Men from the leader in men's hair coloring. Simply apply Just for Men and in 5 minutes shampoo out.
Gray is blended away. The look of my natural color is back in 5 minutes. That was me, and it won't fade or wash out.
My hair takes forever, but you look great in just 5 minutes.
The look of your natural color in just 5 minutes with Just for Men.
It's happening again. Right before your eyes. One day only. Yes, it's true. The Dynamite Channel 7 team has once again dug up the dinosaurs for another fun-filled celebration. It's Channel 7's Dino Day at the Lawrence Hall of Science, Saturday, February 2nd. Now's your chance to mingle with the mega giants of yesteryear. So come on down. The exhibit lasts February 2nd through May 27th. See for yourself before they disappear again.
It's a wall-to-wall sellout at Auto West Toyota.
It was worth the wait. Boy, are we glad we bought today.
The deal is not done till you deal with us.
Hey, if you want to save money, this is the place to be.
No one can save you bigger bucks. Tercel, $49 down or $99 a month. Save $5,000 on a Toyota. Two-wheel drive trucks, $49 down or $99 a month. Get to Fremont Boulevard in Fremont now. Auto West Toyota, the Toyota warehouse. It's the time to buy.
The Pentagon has a phone bank for families of servicemen and women in the Persian Gulf. If you call, you must have the soldier's Social Security number, rank, and military unit. For the Army, call 1-800-542-9254. Air Force, 1-800-253-9276. Navy, 1-800-732-1206. And Marines, 1-800-523-2694. The Coast Guard at 1-800-283-8724. Remember, numbers are for families only.
Damage from the Gulf War is Carl Sagan, one of America's leading scientists, who sees potentially catastrophic effects. Dr. Sagan joins us from Ithaca, New York, where he is a professor at Cornell University. And from our Washington Bureau, Professor Fred Singer of the University of Virginia, who sees the possible oil fires as a nuisance at worst. Am I overstating the case or understating the case, Professor Singer, from your point of view?
I think you've stated it about correctly.
A nuisance. We're talking here about dozens, possibly scores of gigantic oil wells that we know have been mined and that could be simultaneously set off.
It's very hard to understand the scenario here. I assume that this could be another miscalculation by Saddam Hussein. He has a distinguished record of miscalculations. His invasion of Kuwait, his judgment about George Bush. I don't see any purpose in putting these oil wells and oil storage depots on fire. I know experts have suggested that this would inhibit our operations, but I think they should point out that our targets, our operations, are focused on Iraq. And as far as I know, Saddam Hussein has no plans to put his own oil wells on fire.
I mean, first of all, I was going to try and talk with you about the environmental consequences of this, but, you know, before we focus on Iraq, we're also talking about getting 400,000 some odd Iraqi troops out of Kuwait. So clearly some of the battle is likely to take place in Kuwait, where those fires presumably would have some military impact. But focus, if you would, on the environmental damage. If all those oil wells and storage depots are set on fire simultaneously, you're telling me that the impact environmentally would be negligible?
Yes, we have, I think, quite valid calculations that support this. These are calculations that have been done by the Defense Department and the Department of Energy, by Dr. Richard Small at Sierra Research, and by Dr. Joyce Penner at Livermore National Laboratory. And what these calculations on supercomputers show is, first of all, that there wouldn't be enough smoke, even in the worst case. And secondly, that the smoke would only go to an altitude of about 3,000 feet, which means, according to the National Academy calculations, that the smoke would rain out after about 3 to 5 days. So the lifetime of the smoke is quite limited.
Assuming, of course, that the fires are put out. But let us say that the fires...
No.
No?
No. Assuming that the fires continue, the smoke would only rise to a very low altitude and therefore would have a limited lifetime in the atmosphere. The atmosphere cleans itself after about 3 or 4 days by rain.
But we're talking here about fires which could create smoke, I would assume, that would cause a blanket over the entire region of Kuwait, and that would be more or less constant. In other words, it's constantly replenishing itself.
Yes, it would be replenished, but as you've seen from the satellite pictures, these are rather thin trails, and you'd see a number of thin trails going towards the east or southeast, but nothing that would really blanket Kuwait, never mind blanket the world, as has been suggested.
All right, Professor Sagan, quite clearly you disagree, so take your best shot.
Okay, what I'm about to describe are some calculations that Richard Turco, who appeared on your your piece that began this part of the segment, and I have done. We assume that all the Kuwaiti oil producing facilities are mined and ask what would happen if they're all simultaneously in flames. This is by no means a worst case because we're not paying any attention to stored oil. We're not paying any attention to natural gas. We're ignoring the possibility of oil well fires in Iraq, which exist right now, and I would imagine are likely to grow with further Allied raids. And we're neglecting the possibility of the extension of the war to oil-producing facilities in Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf Emirates, and if the war really takes off in Iran.
So just limiting it to Kuwait, what do you project?
A set of smoke plumes arises over Kuwait, is carried east by the prevailing westerlies. The smoke is self-lofting. This seems to be something that Dr. Singer neglected in his discussion. We now know from the nuclear winter investigation of the problem that black sooty smoke heated by the sun heats the surrounding air. The hot air rises, carrying the entrained soot to much higher altitudes. Now, another important point is you can't cap an oil well fire. Red Adair takes a week to weeks for a single petroleum fire. So the natural lifetime of these oil well fires is months to maybe as much as a year, which means that if we have a winter war that involves this burning, the smoke will continue into spring, summer, and possibly even fall, the growing season.
And Dr. Sagan, clearly this is a subject on which we could, and perhaps one of these days will spend an entire broadcast, but if you could just very quickly spell out for me
that the net effects will be very similar to the explosion of the Indonesian volcano Tambora in 1815, which resulted in the year 1816 being known as the year without a summer. There were massive agricultural failures in North America and in Western Europe, and very serious human suffering, and in some cases starvation. Especially for South Asia, that seems to be in the cards, and perhaps for a significant fraction of the Northern Hemisphere as well.
Professor Sagan, Professor Singer, thank you both very much indeed. We'll look at today's military coverage from the Pentagon's pool reporters and talk with our own correspondent in Saudi Arabia when we come back.
To be 7 again, high-spirited. A parent's pride and joy.
I'm gonna be 8 in 2 weeks.
Don't count on it. Problem Child, coming to video stores January 31st from MCA Universal Home Video.
They destroyed everything he had, everything he was. Now crime has a new enemy, and justice has a new face. Who is Darkman? Find out February 14th at your local video store.
Pain from just one sensitive tooth can start the domino effect. Pain can make you stop brushing, lead to plaque buildup, gingivitis, periodontal disease, even tooth loss. Sensodyne toothpaste helps stop the pain and the domino effect.
I'll never get through tomorrow if I don't get some Z's.
Introducing single-dose maximum strength Nitol. Just one will help you fall fast asleep fast. New maximum strength Nitol. Just one Nitol will help you get a lot of Z's.
When you get to a sale, and this is all that's on sale, it's not like the National Home Appliance Sale at Sears Brand Central, where virtually every major brand's on sale. Like this huge LXI 27-inch MTS stereo TV with remote. But hurry, because you get the picture.
Call me irresponsible.
The Subaru Legacy with full-time four-wheel drive and anti-lock brakes. Since the next guy is capable of almost anything, shouldn't the same be true of your next car?
My Ellen's a ball of fire. She's a supermom to her 2 kids. A career woman up for a big promotion, but I'm scared, see, because, well, to handle it all, she's doing cocaine and marijuana, and it's changing her. And I don't know what to do.
Success can be very demanding. If you or someone you love is meeting the challenge with drugs or alcohol, ask for help. Call 696-5544, the Mills Peninsula Chemical Dependency Center.
Beautiful hair. They say you either have it or you don't. But you know what? You can go and get it. You know, Pantene can really change your hair. It has a pro-vitamin B5 complex, which makes your hair get stronger on the inside. And so healthy, shiny, beautiful on the outside. Even Pantene Styling has it. For beautiful style, too. Pantene, you either have it or you don't.
Almost all of the pictures you've seen of our fighting forces in the Gulf comes as the result of some 16 to 20 network pools that have been set up by the Pentagon. These include correspondents, producers, and camera people from all of the networks. From time to time, we're going to bring you some of the more interesting reports from these pools, and you may see correspondents on our broadcast from other networks. Here is today's pool report on one of America's top tank battalions from Martha Teichner of CBS. You will, by the way, hear Martha's instructions on how the story should be put together. These are the directions we used when they came into our headquarters here.
This is the Teichner narration for Pool 8, and we were out today with people from the 1st Infantry Division and from the 1st Armored Division. 3, 2, 1.
Round on the way. Send it.
70 tons of force, the M1A1 Abrams tank. It's fast and accurate. It is capable of hitting a target 2.5 miles away. America's newest tank, the Gulf War, will be its first real test in battle. Now we go to Sound on Tape, Sergeant George Savage, Master Gunner, Alpha Company, 1st Infantry Division.
The M1 tank was built to run fast and shoot on the move, and it's the perfect environment to do just that because of the open spaces, the long ranges that we can engage at, and the terrain that's not rolling, so we don't have to worry about rolling across terrain. It's flat as it can be. It's perfect terrain for us.
Maybe open up a little natural sound here, and then narration. Included in the Army's daily dress rehearsals are Apache helicopters. Like the M1A1 tanks, new technology on trial in this war. These tank killers will provide air cover for U.S. armor in what is expected could be one of the great tank battles of the century. Then we insert the on-camera.
These are truly the big guns, the heaviest armor the United States has in Saudi Arabia. It will be their responsibility to plow through Iraqi defensive lines, essentially to win the ground war. What are you going to do to the Iraqis?
You kick your ass, man. We'll meet them with our calling cards, a 120-millimeter smooth-bore main gun.
Then we have open natural sound of the 1st Armored Division Delta Company soldiers doing their war cry.
No flag! No flag! Courage, conquers, no damn flag!
Tell me what you just did.
We did what's called the Warrior's Cheer. Through history, before going to battle, soldiers, many armies do a Warrior's Cheer. That just happens to be ours.
What was the thing you were reciting? I couldn't really understand it very well.
Oh, we could do it again? No. It's,
do it quietly so that I
it goes, no slack, courage conquers, no damn slack. And we go, something like that.
And what does that all signify in terms of your readiness for this whole thing?
Well, no slack is what we'll give Iraq. No slack to Iraq, period. No slack happens to be our company motto. Now, courage conquers is our battalion motto, and that began in World War II with General Abrams. He used to command this battalion way back when. So that's why, in battle, courage always conquers. That's what we have right here. Just look in their faces.
With their part of the fighting imminent, the M1A1s race across the sand like desert speedboats. As one soldier put it, in a hurry to get in harm's way. Martha Teichner with American tank companies near the Saudi-Iraqi border. And that's it.
Last night, the Iraqi Scud activity was directed against Saudi Arabia, but it's now after 8 o'clock in the morning there, and Saudi Arabia had a relatively quiet night. Nightline correspondent Forrest Sawyer joins us from Dahran. Tell me about the weather forecast.
Well, Ted, it's an indication of how quickly the weather patterns can change here during the winter season. When I arrived on this platform about an hour and 15 minutes ago, it was relatively clear. And weather has been moving in. It has gotten increasingly cold, increasingly hazy. Now, if you drive 3-4 hours north where the bombing takes place, it may be different. But if it's like this, they're going to have some problems with their runs today.
What kind of information are you getting, Forrest, in terms of the briefings that you get there? How much hard information can you get? And when you ask a tough question, do you ever get a straight answer?
Well, Ted, if we were to be perfectly candid, we would have to say we don't know very much at all about how this war is being conducted. We have the briefings in which they say, all right, we've had 10,000 sorties or 11,000 sorties or 12,000 sorties. We'll hear that today. They say we're being about 80% effective and we're right on target. And then they release 5 or 6 pieces of video which show these high-technology weapons working absolutely perfectly. I expect there are some video that show that they don't work so perfectly. Now, there is a beast of war out there, some elephant that we're trying to describe, and if we're doing that based on the information that we're giving, and that's all that we're able to have, we're about at the toenail range right now. We really don't know how the war is being conducted, though the military says they're going to start giving us some evidence starting today.
Is anyone complaining, and is it doing any good?
People are starting to grumble a bit. I've been a little surprised at how quiet the press has been and how decorous some of these briefings have been. But I noticed yesterday that some of the tension is beginning to settle in. And I expect if we were to continue at this level of information or lack of information, they would start becoming increasingly raucous. And they probably should.
Forrest Sawyer, thank you. I'll be back with a final program note after this.
During the course of one 60-minute workout, a body can be depleted of vitamins B6 and C, carbohydrates, and valuable potassium, all of which, it so happens, can be replaced by eating one Chiquita banana. So whatever you put out, put back. Chiquita, quite possibly the world's perfect food.
It's John Carlson on the phone from Los Angeles again.
Carlson? He's from Apple Computers ad agency. They want to do a commercial about us.
Would we get to be in the commercial?
No, because we can't do it.
Why not?
Over the past 15 months, we've doubled our productivity. We've cut development time by 1/3.
That's what I mean.
Why would we go on national TV and tell our competition exactly how we did it?
It's a good point.
When you get to a sale, and this is all that's on sale, it's not like the National Home Appliance Sale at Sears Brand Central, where virtually every major brand's on sale. Like this huge LXI 27-inch MTS stereo TV with remote. But hurry, because you get the picture.
LensCrafters made my state-of-the-art glasses in just under an hour, so I could see better and perform better fast.
LensCrafters puts the whole lab right in the store to custom craft your top quality glasses in about an hour. Call LensCrafters at 1-800-522-LENS.
If this is a cold, this is the flu. Cold. Flu. Cold. Flu. If what you've got is more than a simple cold, now there's Metaflu, with a maximum dosage of 4 strong medicines to give you flu-strength relief for even your worst symptoms. New Metaflu from Parke-Davis. For more than a cold. For the flu. Metaflu.
Your Ford dealers just received a special shipment of cars factory price to save you thousands. Hundreds of Mustangs have just arrived with air, stereo cassette, and more at no extra charge. A special allocation of loaded Tauruses, 1,000 less than before. A huge selection of Thunderbirds equipped with cassette stereo, speed control, and more at no extra charge. These aren't rebates, they're actual reductions in the sticker prices of each vehicle. Plus, you could save hundreds more with factory-to-dealer incentives.
Some of the early reactions and stories about the operation. I also said that this operation was likely to run for a long period of time. Yesterday, with Operation Desert Storm in its 6th day, I noticed a newspaper headline which said, quote, "War drags on." Finally, this morning, I noticed that the style section of the Washington Post had 3 separate stories about the press covering the war in the Gulf. As an old Washington hand, I know that having the press reporting on a story is usually a sign that they've run out of things to say about the story. So Colin and I decided to spend a little time with you this afternoon to see if we could give you some new information. Some important qualifiers to keep in mind as we go through the briefing this afternoon. And many of these may be obvious, but I think need to be restated. The Iraqis, Saddam Hussein, have a very large military force. Depending upon what criteria you use, certainly one of the largest in the world. Some have said the fourth largest in the world. In the last decade, he spent over $50 billion on armaments. The force possesses thousands of tanks, hundreds of aircraft, over 1 million men in uniform, missiles, etc. In the Kuwaiti theater of operations in Kuwait and southern Iraq, there are over 120 brigades, some 30-plus divisions dug in that area. I don't think anyone here expected that we would get rid of all that capability within the first week of the operation. Over 10,000 separate sorties have been flown on combat and support missions in just the past 7 days. Our goal remains the same, to liberate Kuwait by forcing Saddam Hussein out. And to do that, we have to weaken his military force and to go after his offensive military capability. In pursuit of that objective, we began by concentrating on a carefully planned set of military targets that we will continue to hit over the course of the next several days and weeks. We've started with command and control, with his communications facilities, his air defense units and radars, his airfields, his Scud missile launchers. We've gone after the factories where Iraq has produced chemical and biological weapons and until recently continued working on nuclear weapons. We've also gone after the mainstay of Saddam's land forces, the Republican Guard units located near the Iraqi-Kuwaiti border. All of these targets we chose in advance. The pilots of the Allied Air Forces have operated in accordance with clear instructions to launch weapons only when they are certain they've selected the right targets under correct conditions. Iraq, on the other hand, has chosen to launch a highly inaccurate weapon, the Scud missile, at major population centers with no certainty about where the Scuds will land. In contrast, we've carefully chosen our targets and we bombed them with precision. Based on the reports we're getting from our pilots and the evidence of gun camera recordings, many of which you've seen, the bombing missions are going well. The missions are based on the target list drawn up before the operation started. At the same time, we've been eager to know about the kind of damage which we've been able to cause. That's why we do bomb damage assessment, and these assessments are now coming in and will be used to make judgments about the success of our efforts to date and to guide the planning of future operations. I want to caution you again that a military operation of this intensity and complexity cannot be scored every evening like a college track meet or a basketball tournament. I know how hard it is for you to cover this kind of an operation when you cannot see what's going on inside Iraq or occupied Kuwait. Some of you have been critical of us for not putting information out more quickly. I understand your point, but we want to be certain that we don't rush down here with premature words of success. We are deliberately waiting until we have some confidence in the results of specific categories of targets. That may well not fit the 24-hour cycle that you're held to, but we want to have confidence in what we are saying before we say it. 2 final points. There may well be surprises ahead for us. No one should assume that Saddam Hussein does not have significant remaining military capability. We have to anticipate that he will try to use that against us and our allies. We have to assume that he may seek to launch airstrikes and more Scuds or hit oil fields or generate terrorist attacks. He is a man who will use any means at his disposal to break up the coalition and to avoid defeat. But he cannot change the basic course of the conflict. He will be defeated. Our first obligation here in the Pentagon is to carry out the President's orders and to win the war. We must also do everything possible to do it in a manner that holds American and Allied casualties to an absolute minimum. We recognize that we also have an obligation to provide as much information as possible about the progress of our efforts to the press. We will do that. But you, the members of the press, have to understand that first and foremost, we must safeguard the security of future operations to protect the lives of those who will be asked to carry them out. With that, I'd like to turn the briefing over to my colleague, Colin Powell, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, with a general overview of the status of the operation to date. Colin?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Let me also express my pride, and I expect it's the pride of all Americans, that the professionalism with which the men and women of the armed forces have carried out this operation so far. And of course, I share the Secretary's concern about our missing in action, and our prayers are with the families of those who have lost loved ones, and especially with the families of those who do have missing in action, who may well be prisoners of war. This is the end of the first week of operations, and what I'd like to do is for a few moments take stock with you in an attempt to dampen out the oscillations between euphoria and distress that sometimes catches us up every hour on the hour. And I'd like to do that by first reminding you of the military operational objective that we set out to accomplish, and that is simply to eject the Iraqi army from Kuwait. All of our activities must ultimately support this fundamental military objective. And of course, when we achieve that objective, we then will be in a position to restore the legitimate government of Kuwait and provide for the security of the region. Let me also remind you once again, as we've said here previously, this is an air-land-sea campaign, not just an air campaign, which at some point will end and then something else starts. It is a single, coherent, integrated air-land-sea campaign. The campaign plan has executed so far pretty much as we have expected, with a few exceptions. The weather turned more severe after 2.5 days of operations than we had expected. We knew we were going to have 2.5 days, and we thought we'd lose a day or two to weather conditions, but those weather conditions were more severe than we expected when they finally hit, when the front came in, and lasted a little bit longer than we expected. As a result, a number of our planned missions had to be aborted. The BDA process has been behind schedule because of cloud cover and other weather problems, and we have had to cancel some target coverage. All this means is that we have to make that up over time, but we are still essentially on our original game plan. The other point I might make is that we devoted more effort than we initially thought we might have to go after the Scud targets that you have reported on so much in the last several days. Mobile Scuds were the problem that we had anticipated they would be, and now that we are into it, and I'll say more about Scuds later, we are finding that it's taken more of an effort on our part to go after those Scuds than we had anticipated. But notwithstanding these sorts of problems, we're pleased with Week 1, and we are satisfied that the contribution that the Strategic Air Campaign is making to our overall objective is a good contribution and is about what we expected. What I'd like to do is discuss certain parts of the air phase of the campaign and the results we've achieved in an effort to answer your questions with respect to how are we doing, how effective has the operation been so far. Let me first start talking about the air-to-air part of the campaign, how it's been going with respect to U.S. Air Forces engaged in aerial combat with Iraqi Air Forces. Iraqi air-to-air interception to date has been, for the most part, totally ineffective. In air-to-air engagements, the results are 19 Iraqi interceptors destroyed in aerial combat, and we believe the most we might have lost is 1. We were carrying it as 0 until earlier today when we did some more analysis, talked to some pilots, and one of our planes may have been hit in air-to-air engagements. So at best, 19-0, at worst at the moment, 19-1. Their losses in the interceptor category have all been F-1s and MiG-29s, their first-line interceptor aircraft. Other losses that they have sustained raise their total combat aircraft losses to something in the neighborhood of 41. But the real measure of effectiveness, the real way to look at this and make an assessment of how we're doing is not by the number of aircraft downed or how many sorties we've flown or how many bunkers we've hit and how many bombs we dropped. The real measure of effectiveness is what has the Iraqi Air Force been able to do to interfere with Operation Desert Storm. And the fact of the matter is that after 1 week period of time, no Iraqi airplane has conducted a single ground attack against any coalition target. And with the one exception of perhaps one airplane that may have been downed, the Iraqi Air Force has not been able to interfere with our air operations. When you consider that the Iraqi Air Force has had a massive amount of money and resources invested into it over the years and has some 800 fighter bombers and interceptors, I think it's fair to say that this has not been, so far, a very good return the investment that Saddam Hussein has put into the Air Force. Nevertheless, it is a large Air Force. It has a latent capability. It has the ability to conduct defensive operations and offensive operations if they can ever get their act together. But as you will see in the course of the briefing, their sortie rate is down and their ability to operate has pretty much been constrained. Can we turn this one over, please? By way of illustration, this map, if for those of you who wish to count the little dots, there are 66 little dots, and they reflect, somebody will count, I'm sure of that. They reflect main operating bases in red, dispersal airfields in blue, and then the general Scud launch areas from the west out to Israel and from the east down south into Riyadh are shown by the black hatchered marks. This is a very extensive airfield system. Hardened bunkers, you've seen pictures of them, underground command and control installations, hardened fuel facilities, hardened ammo facilities. But the fact of the matter is that after 1 week of operation, we are not being challenged by this Air Force, and in fact, within the last 24 hours, we have only seen activity at the air bases that you see being pointed out to you with a little yellow dot in the middle of the red. Would you go over them again very quickly? Those are the only ones that have shown any active work in the last 24 hours. Now, if I can turn to this chart just to give you another illustration. This summarizes what I said earlier. 411 interceptors, 398 fighter bombers, 809 total, killed 19 in aerial combat, another 22 confirmed kills on the ground for a total of 41 in this category. They have a lot of other kinds of aircraft that could run this total up to roughly 1,400 if you add in transports and helicopters and things of that nature. But for the combat category, the thing that we worry about, this is the number. Now, I'm not really concerned about this number at the moment. They are, for the most part, on the ground, in hardened shelters, trying to hide and survive. In due course, they may wish to come out and challenge us, or they just may try to ride it out for as long as possible. These numbers will rise over time as we continue the campaign to go after shelters, go after bunkers, and essentially rip up the Air Force in its entirety. Let me turn now to another part of the air battle, and that has to do with ground-to-surface air defense system, the SAMs and anti-aircraft guns. This chart reflects at a high level of aggregation, because I don't want to give away too much information, but the main air defense SAM belts in red circles, and then the circles going all around the country reflect their early warning capability at the beginning of the operation. An extremely large, sophisticated air defense system, principally with Soviet equipment, Soviet missile equipment, some French, some U.S. that was captured, as well as a very comprehensive system of trying to integrate all of those missile systems and gun systems. Hardened command and control centers around the country. The fact of the matter is that we were able to attack this air defense envelope with great success over the last week by first taking out the early warning capability, blinding them, and then going after the operating centers, the various sector operating centers that they use to wire this all together. And for the most part, we have not been seriously affected by this very large air defense system. We have had a total of 10 aircraft lost, as you know. As we go through the analysis of how we lost those aircraft, at the moment, it appears we lost 2 by SAM fire, surface-to-air missile fire, and 3 more by ground fire, and the other 5 we're still taking a look at. But when you take a look at our total losses of only 10 U.S. aircraft, and I'll show you a chart here, I think, here it is. Show you a chart there that, well, it says SAM-1, AAA-3. I had it the other way around, maybe, but it's something close to that, and I apologize for the difference in numbers. When you take a look at the total of 16 aircraft losses for the coalition in its entirety, and you consider the number of combat sorties that have been flown and the numbers of single aircraft that are involved in this operation, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 aircraft, this is a very low loss rate for an operation of this type. Putting all that together, we can conclude that Allied air forces have achieved air superiority over not only the Kuwaiti theater of operations, but throughout the entire theater to include Iraq. We can debate whether it's air superiority as defined by American doctrine or air supremacy, as some of my British colleagues have alluded, or local air superiority, as some of my friends in Riyadh say. I used to teach the subject. I own the JCS publication that has the definition in it, which I helped write when I was a captain, and I can assure you that this qualifies for the definition of air superiority. When you can operate in an unhindered way, as we have been operating over an area like this against an air force that size and with an air defense system that sophisticated, we have achieved air superiority. That is not to say that a young pilot who is taking off will say, Powell says we have air superiority, I've got nothing to worry about. Not at all. We're dealing with an enemy that is resourceful, an enemy that knows how to work around problems, an enemy that is ingenious. You can be sure that while we're here today, they're in Baghdad trying to figure out workarounds, trying to determine where their weaknesses are and see if they have capability to fix those weaknesses. And every pilot that goes against this environment still has to be concerned that he is going against an environment that has the potential of taking down his airplane. So we are not getting complacent. We are not writing this off. But in terms of how it looks at General Schwarzkopf's level and my level, we have air superiority. And with that air superiority, we can now begin to use our air forces to simply maintain this superiority and start to concentrate down closer to the Kuwaiti theater of operations, remembering once again our military objective is the Iraqi army in Kuwait. We have free run of the area as much as possible. There will still be losses, and I don't want to understate that, but in general, air superiority. Any pilot will tell you, though, that the real danger is guns, and as we get closer into the Kuwaiti theater of operations and our op tempo picks up, we will focus a great deal of our attention on knocking down the anti-aircraft gun threat to our pilots so that they can get even lower and make their strikes more effective as we go after discrete units on the ground in due course. Before turning to the Iraqi Army, let me be totally joint and say a word about the Iraqi Navy. A Navy of almost no capability, of a limited number of patrol boats. We have destroyed several of those patrol boats. We have taken out a silkworm site that they were manning, and we have also sunk or severely damaged, it isn't sunk, in fact it is floating, but severely damaged a ship they have been using to lay mines. And also within the last week, we have destroyed a number of the mines. I think the count is 24 of the mines that have been floating free in the Persian Gulf. So I think we have dealt with the mine threat for the moment, and in due course, if the Kuwaiti Navy and if the Iraqi Navy in some way decides to come out anymore and challenge us with these minor and insignificant patrol boats, it is indeed a manageable threat. Let me turn now to the Iraqi Army in the Kuwaiti theater of operations. As the Secretary pointed out, this is a large combined arms army. It has tanks, it has personnel carriers, it has air defense guns, it has very redundant, resilient communications between the different operating echelons of the Army. It has stockages of food, ammunition, and parts with the Army in theater, and they have a very elaborate supply system coming down from the interior of the country to sustain that Army. Our strategy to go after this Army is very, very simple. First, we're going to cut it off, and then we're going to kill it. To cut it off, that began last week when we started to go after the nerve center, the brains of the operation, the command and control of the operation, and the lines of communications that come out of Baghdad and other places in the country, flowing down the Tigris and Euphrates valleys, down these lines of communications to try to support somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 men down here in the Kuwaiti theater of operations. So all we have been doing to gain control over here and begin severing this and try to deaden the nerve endings up here all goes back to our original military objective to get rid of the Army that is in Kuwait. Now that that has started, we will intensify this cutting off process, go after the lines of communications as they enter the vicinity of Basra and as they come out of Basra going down to the Army.
going after the command and control means, the means by which they exercise command and control over that force in the theater, going after mobility, trucks that move supplies forward, anything that allows that Army to function, we will now go after. And as we get into the process of cutting it off, we will also step up the process of killing it by going after stockpiles, ammunition, food, stripping away their gun air defense, using air attacks, and if it becomes necessary, we are assembling a fairly sizable ground force that could finish off the job should that be necessary. I also want to emphasize that we have quite a capability at sea with naval gunfire, with naval aviation, as well as quite a formidable amphibious capability with our Marine forces. And as some of you know, our 2 Marine Expeditionary Brigades are conducting practice operations today. I'm not telegraphing anything. I just want everybody to know that we have a toolbox that's full of lots of tools, and I brought them all to the party. General Schwarzkopf has them all at the party. So how are we doing with respect to that major operational objective, the Iraqi Army in Kuwait? We are really just starting in earnest. And I got to make a point to you that assessing the damage on a deployed army in the field is quite a different proposition from assessing the damage on a building that you've just hit. You've seen some great film footage of a laser-guided bomb going down the vent shaft of a building, boom, it blows up, it burns down, there you have it. It doesn't work that way when you have a deployed armored brigade in the field. They're spread out, they're dug in, they're hiding, they're not standing out there like a building, they're avoiding air attack. They're going to put out dummies to try to deceive you as to their exact locations. They're going to put in primary positions and alternate positions and supplementary positions. They're going to dig in their lines of communication. They're going to put in overhead cover. Those tanks are designed not to be easily destroyed. And so going after that kind of unit is a much more difficult proposition, but they are vulnerable. There's no question about it. And we are now turning our attention and selecting munitions and selecting target packages to go after that army, which in effect is sitting out there not doing anything. It has not moved since the operation began. There's been no major, in fact, there have been no minor shifts of units around. It is, for the most part, sitting there, dug in, waiting to be attacked, and attacked it will be. But it is also sitting there without air support, without anything to keep the attack from being prosecuted against them, and with each passing day, with a reduced ability to bring in logistics down the lines of communication. There is no question that this large force will become weaker every day. That's absolutely mathematical. We are going to do everything we can to make sure that Army cannot be reinforced with new troops, and over time, they will have increasing difficulty to resupply it. Yet that Army has good soldiers. The units are of varying quality. The Republican Guard, as we've said many times, is quite good. Other parts of the force are not quite so good. We have anecdotal evidence of some low morale and anecdotal evidence of some defections, but it is not a trend yet. We have started to get some bomb damage assessment on the Republican Guard units that we've been striking. In some cases, the analysts who look at these photos, and I look at them as well, tell me that you see that unit out there, it's taken about 40% damage. I can't tell that. You've got to be an expert. But there is damage taking place. Other units that we have hit, we've looked at the photographs and said we didn't get a good hit on that. They're just too dispersed. We've got to go back and do it again. Very low or light damage against that unit. So you are not going to get, and we will be unable to give you, the kind of rapidly moving and adjusting scorecard on how we're doing against that Army for some time. You really don't know how you're doing against an Army until that Army tries to perform its function. If it's just sitting there taking the punishment, we know we're hurting it. We really don't know how badly we've hurt it until it starts to move, or until it comes up on the radio so we can hear it talking to other units, until we can see defections come out of it, or if it's necessary to go in and fight it. So we are seeing some anecdotal evidence, but the BDA is still out in that, and we really have only begun to do the job on it. I'd like to close by saying a few words about some of the strategic campaign targets we had up here. First, let me just make one point in this slide I forgot earlier. As a measure of effectiveness of how we're doing in the air campaign, I just pulled these two things out. I've laundered them so you can't really tell what I'm talking about, because I don't want the Iraqis to know what I'm talking about. But trust me, Trust me. This reflects an order of magnitude of electronic emissions out of the Iraqi radar system. And it shows that early in December and through December, they were operating about over here with SAM, AAA radars, and with early warning radars. On the 17th of January, as you would expect, it peaked up to here. And over the last week, it has come down to here. This represents well over a 95% reduction. Now, it's a combination of damage we have done, as well as, I suspect, clever operational security techniques on their part to keep us from knowing exactly what's going on or how badly they have been damaged. I am also sure they're trying to work around and reconstitute capability so they can get back up. And so I don't want to overstate it, just to give you a measure of effectiveness and let you know this is how we try to measure what's going on out there. And this also is by another measure of effectiveness, and I'm sorry for this being so small, we just finished it, shows you their daily sortie rate. And this was before the action began on the 30th of December. They were running about 235 sorties a day during that period. If weather was bad earlier in December, a little lower, but just as a benchmark, 235 sorties. The day of the war, they ran 116 sorties, and for the last couple of days, they've been running 31 to 40 sorties. Once again, the kind of measure of effectiveness that is more useful to us than is how many sorties we flew or how many bombs we dropped, et cetera, et cetera. A couple of things about specific campaign targets that really go to the issue of how to make sure that when this is all over, the kind of threat that has existed in the region is quite different than the threat that existed before it began. First, with respect to nuclear weapons. We have targeted that nuclear facility they have very carefully. I have looked at the bomb damage assessment myself with trained analysts, and I think I can confirm for you that the two operating reactors they had are both gone. They're down. They're finished. And the one that the Israelis took care of some years ago remains down. With respect to chemical facilities, the focus of our effort for the first week has been on their production capability and their ability to fill munitions. There are hundreds of bunkers out there, and it would have been a waste of our effort to keep chasing every single bunker which may or may not have chemical weapons stored in them, because they have dispersed a lot of that chemical weapon capability that they have out to operating units. So we concentrated on production facilities and the facilities that they use to put the material into actual weapons to be delivered. And we have had quite a bit of success, and without getting into specifics, I think I can say that we have done considerable damage to their ability to continue producing chemical weapons. But they still have a chemical weapons capability. Their artillery can fire chemical weapons, their multiple launch rocket systems, their free rocket over ground systems, and their Air Force does have that capability, so is still a threat to Allied forces in the region. With respect to their biological warfare facilities, we have gone after those and we created quite a problem for them, I think. We have seriously damaged those facilities. There was a story earlier today about the infant formula factory. It is not an infant formula factory, no more than the Rabta chemical plant in Libya made aspirin. It was a biological weapons facility, of that we are sure, and we have taken it out. And we will continue to seek out any other facilities that we believe are involved in the production of biological weapons. With respect to their National Command Authority and their command and control systems, they are very good at this. They have redundant systems, resilient systems, they have workarounds, they have alternatives, and they are still able to command their forces. They have not lost command and control of their forces or of the country, but they are doing it without benefit of their Ministry of Defense, their Defense Intelligence Center, their main communications nodes, and they're doing it for the most part on generator power because we have taken care of the central power system within the city. He still does retain the ability to command and control. We are also now turning our attention increasingly to military production facilities, how he makes bombs, how he makes weapons, how he makes repair parts. This is a target category that we will go after at our leisure over time. We're in no hurry. We don't want to waste sorties on things that are further down the priority list if we can get to them further down the priority list. The most significant problem we have right now are the Scuds. There's no doubt about it. When you think of what Saddam Hussein has done for the past week, he has not thrown a single military punch back at us. What he has done is use this weapon of terror, the Scuds, as was mentioned earlier by the Secretary, to go after populations, to go after cities. Why? As a weapon of terror, to try to expand the conflict, to try to draw in the Israelis, and I must say I'm extremely pleased with the restraint that the Israeli government has shown so far. But it is a vexing problem. They are mobile systems, and some of them are very sophisticated Soviet mobile systems. Others are nothing more than a flatbed truck with a rail on it that they've locally fabricated. We only have estimates of how many of these weapons they have, but we have made it a high priority to locate these weapons and to go after them, and a significant part of our capability is directed toward that Scud facilities, those Scud facility and mobile Scuds. Now, I know there's been a great deal of interest in bomb damage assessment. I wish I could show you the photographs that we have access to. But because of sources and methods, and because we are in an ongoing operation, and because we do not want an enemy to have knowledge of what our real capabilities are, we cannot show you those photographs. What I have done instead is I've made some line drawings, had some line drawings made. They're rather crude, they're kind of cartoonish, but I just want to give you a sense of what our analysts look at, and I will assure you that what I'm about to show you comes directly from the actual imagery, but we have obviously done it in a way that it does not give away any of our capability. This was a large production facility, part of his military infrastructure. It was struck by precision weapons in the first couple of days of the operation. And this is a very accurate reflection of what the thing looks like, total destruction. And the point I want to make is our analysts can see this to this level of detail and give us high assurance that this place has been destroyed. Okay?
Did you say what was produced there at all?
It was an unconventional production facility. Here is an example of a bunker complex, and it's a case where we went after selected buildings. These two were vetted. They had barriers around them. We went after them with precision weapons. Went after these with precision weapons. I think this one was done over a period of a couple of days, Mike. You go strike it, you get an assessment back of the amount of damage you have inflicted on the facility. You go back and strike it again. This has received enough damage that I would suspect that the targeteers over in Centaf are not going to waste a sortie at this time going back and taking care of this last remaining building. These were the key ones. These three fed into what was happening at these two facilities. And so we have essentially destroyed this, even though there might still be a building standing. And I'm just using it as illustrative of the process through which our bomb damage assessment people go through. This next one is a case where initially we went in, destroyed, here's the bunker complex, destroyed this bunker. This one was hit once, and we had to go back and do it again to get the level of damage we needed. This one was also struck, and as the analyst looks at it, part of it is still intact, the top. This part, the lower part, has been blown through, but since the analyst can't see what happened under the part that still has a roof over it, he will not declare this destroyed. They tend to err on the conservative side. This one is completely undamaged because there was no need to waste a sortie or risk a pilot going against that one. We knew what we were looking for in this complex, so we are satisfied with this target, even if somebody were to come along and say, aha, you only got 75% or 80% because this one is still there. We didn't need to hit that one. It has no relevance to the rest of the facility. And I don't know what else we got back here, Mike. And this is an example which I'd like to put up for my British colleagues. One of the things we did early on to deal with the airfields and to keep the Air Force on the ground was to essentially interdict the airfields so they couldn't be used. And you could do that very quickly by trying to crater the runways. In this particular case, this shows a British weapon system, which I think was briefed earlier out of Riyadh, I believe, by a British officer, but it's the JP-233, which goes across the runway and is very effective at cutting concrete. And it will cut up the concrete, break it up, so that the airfield cannot be used for some period of hours, and I don't want to get into how long that might be. Depends on the airfield, depends on the kind of concrete, depends on the kind of cut that's made. And you would use this weapon system and other weapon systems that we have to try to cut this airfield in a number of places to keep it from being used for a while. And then we can come back to it at our leisure and take care of what is on that airfield. In this case, the pilot elected to cut these taxiways here so that the aircraft in these hardened aircraft shelters could not get out to the active runway to take off. And that's that. Let me conclude there by saying, as the Secretary said, I'm satisfied with the campaign. We have been trying to tell everybody in the beginning that we would do it in time and do it as smartly as we can. We're in no hurry. We are not looking to have large numbers of casualties, but it is an integrated campaign, each part of the campaign bearing some relationship to the ultimate objective of ejecting the Iraqi army from Kuwait. Thank you. Secretary? He gets the question. We'll both be happy to answer questions.
Mr. Secretary, given what you've told us today, can you tell us if you think that the Scud search has had any effect on the campaign? And if you do believe what success rates you've had here, then does that mean that you're able to go on a little bit more quickly to some of the phases earlier than you might have thought when this all started?
Well, the Scud search has been important because it has not only the problem of his being able to launch against Saudi Arabia or Israel, but obviously there are major policy questions, major political questions involved in the issue of how you deal with the Scud problem. Because of course, as the chairman mentioned, we've been pleased, as the president said, that the Israelis have restrained themselves up till now and not retaliated and gotten involved in the conflict. But that's a delicate proposition. And, our ability to enhance, our ability to deal with the Scud threat makes it easier for us to deal with the broader policy questions that are involved. And it's a question of diverting resources and deciding how much you're going to put against the Scud problem itself.
Has this created a problem at all for the rest of the
I wouldn't say it's created a problem in that sense. I think it would be fair to say that systems that are focused on dealing with the Scud threat are not available to deal with other threats. But we always knew we were going to have to deal with the Scud threat. We always knew that was a potential problem. We've assumed he may have chemical warheads to go on the Scud, so until we've got a high degree of assurance that we've dealt with that problem, we will continue to devote resources to it.
Secretary Cheney, you said the campaign is going very well. The first thing you cited was the air superiority. Do you really feel that you were really challenged by the Iraqi army? Number one, you said they really have been in the bunkers. Number two, you talked about command and control each day. But there are many reports saying that Saddam Hussein is 4 stories below, underneath the presidential palace and ferrying between the defense ministry. Number 3, you talked about taking out the nuclear sites, but many people felt early on that this would not be a long-term threat. So do you feel that possibly you could be overly predicting a rosy type of outcome in light of this?
No, I tried in my remarks towards the close to focus on the fact that we have to anticipate there'll be additional surprises. That you can by no means count him out yet, given the size force he has, that he could try to find some way to surge his Air Force all at once or go after targets that he's not gone after yet. As the chairman mentioned, we haven't really seen any aggressive military response by him to date. He's basically gone to ground and hunkered down, and the only safe assumption for us to make, especially when we're talking with the press, is, be cautious here. We're trying to be cautious, and no one wants to declare that he no longer constitutes a threat. That would be a very serious mistake.
Quick follow-up. So you think this could be a strategy, as many military analysts believe, to inflict maximum casualties?
It could well be a strategy, and based in part upon the fact that he has not yet been able to find a way to deal with our capabilities.
Secretary, you're right. So, you mentioned, General Powell mentioned 2 times Soviet air defenses, Soviet Scud missiles. How much military cooperation are you getting from the Soviet Union in dealing with this?
You want to answer that?
It's good to be the boss.
Oh, all right.